Hi, welcome back to UI class. So today I would like to discuss the impact of the lockdown due to the pandemic on the retail industry, making use of the retail sales data of New Zealand. In the past 2 years, many countries have been locked down with restrictions on gatherings and shoppings, right, in order to stop the spread of the pandemic. Of course, right, it hard hit retail industry. However, there have been no studies so far to the extent of the impact of the lockdown on retail sales amount, probably because of the difficulties in collecting information, data, especially in controlling the effect of other concurrent events. Here, for example, right, figure 1 shows the situation of the retail market in Hong Kong. And the blue-shaped area shows the year-on-year change of the retail sales amount. And you will find that indeed it starts as early as February of 2019 when retail sales started falling. So it's much, much earlier than the outbreak of the pandemic in early 2020. So it seems to be difficult to disentangle the two effects. And also in Hong Kong, because the government had provided cash payout schemes during the period, which would also affect the retail sales. So that's the reason why in this study, we make use of New Zealand's retail sales data for analysis for the following two reasons. First, because New Zealand had been locked down twice, one in 2020 Q2 for about 2 months and another lockdown in 2021 Q3 for about 4 months. After the first lockdown, which successfully stopped the spread of the virus for almost 1 year from 2020 Q3 to 2021 Q2. So the lockdown in this period was basically lifted and retail activities returned to normal in this period. It provides a very good data for us to investigate about the lockdown effect without other concurrent events. Also, the government did not provide any cash payout scheme to residents. So the retail sales data basically reflect mostly the actual market reaction. So more importantly, I think during the first lockdown, right, due to the restriction of entry of tourists and non-locals, so the plummet in retail sales in the first lockdown was caused by two combined impacts. The first one is the restriction of gathering and shopping of local residents, and the other impact was due to the restrictions of the entry of visitors and non-locals. And then in the second lockdown, right, the fall in retail sales was only caused by the impact of restricting gathering and shopping of local residents because the border has been closed in both 2020 and 2021. The two lockdowns provide a good lecture experiment for us to disentangle the two effects. In other words, right, the second lockdown can compared with the first lockdown effect can help us to eliminate the effect of restricting tourists and non-local visitors effect. In other words, the impact of the first lockdown on retail sales is reasonably expected to be more severe than that of the second lockdown. So then let's go into the detailed information about the retail sales amount and this annual change of New Zealand. Here, figure 2 shows the year-on-year change, and you will find a substantial decrease of about 15.4% per annum due to the first lockdown. In dollar terms, it fell from 24.8 billion to 20 billion New Zealand dollars. And then after successfully stop the spread of the pandemic, then right, retail sales rebounded sharply to more than $28 billion. But then in the second lockdown, it caused retail sales amount to drop again. But in this time, right, it only falls by 1.7% from $27.5 billion to $25.1 billion. So comparing the two percentage change, it is 13.7% less, right, in the second lockdown. So reflecting that, right, the retail consumption of tourists and non-local visitors has a very strong impact on the retail industry in New Zealand. So similarly, right, I have also provide a quarter-to-quarter change diagram here. Similarly, right, the first lockdown result in a 17.5% drop in retail sales. And then the second lockdown made a 7% drop. So the difference between the two is about 10.5%, which again confirm the proportion of tourists and non-local visitors retail consumptions. Let's go into more details about which subsectors in the retail industry which are more affected by the pandemic. Here's the diagram. Say, for example, the blue line, whether in the first and the second lockdown, it results in an increase. So this line represents the supermarket and grocery, right? Because people are forced to buy food and necessities in supermarkets and grocery. So, right, in both the first and the second lockdown, the retail sales amount in supermarket and grocery increased by 10%. But all the other sectors showed a substantial reduction in sales amount. Right. For example, the two hardest hit sectors are the accommodation and catering industries. Right, in the first lockdown, right, the declines are as high as 40% and 39.9% quarterly change for the accommodation and catering industry. Right, it reflects the severity impact due to the restrictions of tourist and non-local visitors. As accommodation refers to hotels and guest house, and then catering also is affected by tourists. After lifting the restriction measures, the rebound is substantial. But besides accommodation and catering industry, and the fuel consumptions also shows a 35.1% permit in the first lockdown, probably reflect the association between the work from home and energy consumption reduction. While in the second lockdown, the retail sales amount of accommodation and catering industries fell much less by just 9.9% and 18.5% respectively, probably because some hotels are now used it for MIQ users. And also, first lockdown include the reduction in retail sales due to the restriction of entry of tourists and non-local visitors. So take food and beverage as an example. The first lockdown was about negative 39.9%, but the second lockdown was only negative 18.5%. So the difference between the two probably reflect the impact of retail's consumption of tourists and non-local visitors on food and beverages. Okay, the last part I would like to show you about the declines in retail sales amount of department store and furniture, hardware and textiles in the two lockdowns, because these two sectors shows a very interesting changes in the two lockdowns, because in most of other sectors, usually the second lockdown will show a much less fall, but in department store and furniture, hardware and textiles, the second lockdown result in a much deeper drops. Here I show you the figure. The second lockdown, right, result in a 22.6% and 18.1% in comparison with just 18.3% and 12.9% in the first lockdown. So probably it indicated that the retail sales of department store and furniture, hardware and textiles requires physical shopping once these premises are locked down. E-shopping does not help. Okay, as a caveat, the above analysis does not address about the disruptions in supply chain, because some retail sectors may not necessarily be affected by a decrease in demand, but instead it may be affected by some disruptions in the supply chain. Say, for example, the decline in car sales is said to be caused by the disruption of the automobile supply chain, but it required more information and data to carry out the analysis. So now the New Zealand government's designed it to live with the virus, and we have migrated into a new traffic light system, and also the government decided not to keep the zero COVID policy. So maybe we have to wait 2 more quarters, and then we can gather the information and carry out another analysis to study about the impact of the 2 policies on the retail sales amount, see whether zero COVID policy or the live with the virus policy would have a bigger impact on the retail sales amount. If you would like to comment, maybe you can leave a message here, and then we can discuss it further after 2 more quarters. That's all for today. Thank you.